Beaucoup d'être présent en si grand nombre. C'est super de vous voir. Donc, je vais continuer en anglais pour introduire Maria Klawe. Donc, Maria Klawe has held many leadership positions, broke the glass ceiling at CS first chair in UBC, first dean of science at UBC, first dean of engineering at Princeton, and first president at Harvey Mudd. So I read somewhere, Maria, that someone says you not only broke the glass ceilings, and that you did not send the ladder down, but the elevator down, so which is good to bring everybody. And you've had numerous awards. I mentioned some yesterday. You're fellow of the ACM, you're fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Science, you're fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and you also got the Life Career Award from the Canadian Association of Computer Science. So many achievements. You've given more than 60 talks in the last, from 2015 to 2020 on EDI across the world, and we're very, very happy and pleased and honored to have you with us today to share with us your experience about EDI. So without further ado, I'd like to give you the mic.
Thank you. So first of all, it's absolutely lovely to be here. And I was very touched by the ceremony yesterday. And it's my first time that I've been to a graduation ceremony in French. And in our family, my older sister is very fluent in French. And my daughter is very fluent in French. When we moved back to Canada in 1988, one of the reasons was that I wanted both of our children to go to French immersion public schools in Vancouver. And my daughter currently works for the United Nations in Geneva and is the special assistant to the special envoy for Syria. So she does peace negotiations. And before that, she spent 3 years in the Central African Republic being the lead on peace negotiations, functioning entirely in French. And so then there's me and my son in between. And it's very funny. From right at the beginning when Sasha started attending French immersion, her accent was, and the entire way through, my accent, my son's accent was really pretty crappy. It's just so like, it's clearly something about the ear and the tongue or the connection between them. But anyhow, I'm very honored to be here. It was very important to me that our children grew up in Canada as Canadians, and even though they have dual citizenship because they were born in the United Nations, I have dual citizenship, so does my husband. But it's very nice to be back in Quebec City, to have a chance to walk around and just to listen to French with my ears. So, title of this talk is Increasing Diversity in STEM Might Be Easier Than You Think. And it's really primarily the story of what happened at Harvey Mudd over the last 16 years in trying to diversify our student population and our faculty population and our board and our staff. So to make it a just much more diverse community. And the things that I want you to take away from this, it is easier than you think. It's not easy. Change, it's just so interesting. I mean, I've spent my entire career, well, not quite my entire career. When I moved to IBM, I moved to IBM Research because I met my husband, Nick Pippinger. Nick is very shy, and he was working for IBM Research. And when we got married, I thought, it's going to be very hard for him to adjust to being married. We intended to have children. Be better if I moved to IBM Research for a couple of years to give him a chance, so he wouldn't have to start teaching and interacting with students all the time. And I thought we'd be there for 3 to 5 years. We stayed for 8. Both of our children were born while we were there. But what I really completely didn't understand at the time was the tremendous benefit that I got on two, well, probably more than two, but at least two axes. One was they were very pro-women and people of color. And so I was made a manager in my 4th year, a senior manager in my 5th year, and I got enormously useful management training, which, you know, still in academia is something we don't do very well. And so I benefited from being in a place that was extremely focused on diversity and on supporting women and, you know, mothers and things like that. And when I went to the University of British Columbia in 1988, it was only then that I really understood what it was like to move to a culture that was not supportive of women. And when I arrived, so I was the first female head of a department, any department in the Faculty of Science. I was the 4th female full professor out of about 200. I was the 11th female professor of any rank in the Faculty of Science. You know, every pronoun was he. That was just the only pronoun that was used. And I just got used to saying, or she. Anytime somebody said, he did that, I would say, or she, because half of the students were female. And, you know, the fact that half of the undergraduates were female in science at a time when only under 4% of the faculty were female was just shocking to me. And I remember I was recruited at the time when the province had decided that they wanted to invest in computer science, mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering because they wanted to build a quote unquote knowledge-based economy. And as you probably know, the BC economy at that time was largely mining, forestry, and fishing. And they realized that that was not going to be good for the longer term. So the provincial government was adding positions. And so I was hired to build a world-class computer science department at UBC. And of course, I wanted to add more women as faculty. We hired 15 faculty while I was department chair. 0 were women. We've made offers every single year. Typically, we made offers to several women each year, as well as several men. And none of the women accepted our offers. And so, you know, a very big part of it was UBC was it had some very good faculty members, but it was not a highly well-known or respected computer science department across the US and Canada. And the people we were making offers to were getting offers from much better known places. A number of men took our offers, no women took our offers. So in 6.5 years as department chair, we went from 1 woman to 1 woman. And it wasn't until a couple of years later, when I was vice president at UBC, we managed to convince Gail Murphy, who had done her undergraduate at Simon Fraser University, did her PhD at the University of Washington. And I went down to visit her in Seattle and to persuade her to take the offer from UBC as a faculty member. She's currently the vice president of research at UBC. And so she was the second. The third was Ann Condon, who was the second NSERC chair for women and science and engineering for BC and the Yukon after me, and a very renowned computer scientist. And by the time I finished my time as Dean of Science at UBC, we had 7 women in the department. So one of the reasons I'm starting by telling you the story of failure for many years is because even when you're really committed and the whole department is really committed and the university is committed to making it happen, it can take a long time. So you have to you have to decide that you want to do this, and then you have to be patient and persevere. And in listening to the many commencement speeches at the ceremony yesterday afternoon, I know that many people talked about the need for patience, hard work, and perseverance, and achieving significant change with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion requires all of those. So I'm going to tell you a bit about Harvey Mudd College. I joined as president in 2006. At that time, just under a third of our students were female. And I'll tell you a bit about what, I don't expect that you know much about Harvey Mudd College. I didn't know much about Harvey Mudd College either. So we went from we're now 50% female, and including across all majors, so engineering, physics, and computer science. And we were about 70% white, and we're now under 30% white. So let me tell you about Mudd. It's a tiny college, so 900 students in total, undergraduate only. We have 100 faculty and 7 departments. So the 7 departments, so 6 of them are STEM departments. So we have engineering, mathematics, computer science, biology, chemistry, physics. I'm missing. Oh, that's 6, right, got it. And we have one other department, which is humanities, social sciences, and the arts. And so one of the things that's, I would say quite different from, a large public university, either in Quebec or elsewhere in Canada, is that our students don't choose their major until the end of their second year. And for the first 3 semesters, they take pretty much all the same courses. So it's called the core curriculum. And so in the first semester, they take a writing course, computer science, math, physics course, chemistry, and that would be it for the first semester. Second semester, they're going to take another physics course, another math course. They're going to take a biology course. They're going to take an humanities, social sciences, and the arts, sort of general introduction to those areas, and they have an elective. And in their third semester, they will take engineering, another math course, used to be another physics course, but by that time they can start taking some courses, electives in the area they might be interested in. So one of the things that's important about this is that every department, every STEM department gets a chance to teach students a course in their first 3 semesters. And that's before they have to choose what their major is. And so you have a chance to either interest them in your discipline and make them excited about it or not. The students are very strong. The way I typically say in Canada is to say, think of your very best honor students, like very bright, very hardworking, but other things that that I would say characteristic the best Canadian honor students: humility, eagerness to help others. And we have an honor code, which basically means that we can give students take-home assignments, take-home exams, all of those kinds of things. And the honor code is something that's very serious. Our faculty values. So our mission statement is to educate, I won't get all the words exactly right, but to educate leaders in science, mathematics, and engineering who are well-versed in all of these disciplines, as well as in social sciences, humanities, and the arts, so that they are prepared to assume leadership roles in their field with a clear understanding of the impact of their work on society. And so of all of that, so basically that says they're going to take a broad set of courses in their education, but the one that we take particularly strongly is understanding the impact of your work on society. And so right now, as we are going through, clearly major changes to the environment and, lots of other issues. This impact of your work in society is one of the things that comes to the fore in attracting students to Mudd. So who comes to teach, to be faculty members at Mudd? It's essentially people who love working with students, who love innovation in both how they teach and what they teach, who want to be as valued for teaching as they are for their research, and who want to teach some of the best, brightest, and nicest students in the universe. So we're all at Mudd because we love students. And we love them not just for what they learn in the classroom, but we think very hard and we care deeply about who they become as human beings. And I put hard work. Everybody at Mudd, even including the president, works very hard. It's just, and we keep on trying to reduce the level of work because we have a lot of faculty with young children. And, it's, I think, important to all of us that we give our faculty the chance to be parents and to enjoy their personal life, as well as be fantastic leaders in the classroom and in the research lab. And one of the things, we keep on making all of these adjustments to make the faculty jobs easier and the student easier. And in spite of doing this multiple times while I've been president, the culture of hard work and of excellence dominates the strategy of reducing workload over and over again. So it's just something to, when you think about doing these things, it's, I love the culture of hard work. I love the fact that we care so much about excellence and all those kinds of things, but we're constantly trying to balance that with the needs for, balance. Harvey Mudd has been a co-ed college since it was founded. It was founded in 1955. The first students arrived in 1957, so our first graduating class was 1961. And it probably was on the order of 1% female for the first 20 years or so. And by the time it got to 1996, so 40 years after it was founded, we were up to about 20% women as faculty and 20% women as students. Now, one of the things you often see is that you'll see a place that has, say, 50% students, but only has 20% female faculty. And that happens quite often in chemistry and biology departments. And so you might wonder how were they as successful in getting female faculty at the same level as their students, even back, it's hard for me to believe that 1996 is a long time ago, but it actually is. And the answer is that there are very, very few places that you can go in the United States where you would teach fantastic students and be really valued for your teaching as well as your research. And so I think women were disproportionately interested in going to Mudd as a faculty member compared to going to R1, because women PhDs often really enjoy teaching. And so when I arrived in 2006, we were about 30% female faculty and about 30% female students. And 10 years after I arrived, we had achieved parity in terms of our students, and we'd increased the female faculty level to 40%, which is very, very high for an quote unquote elite STEM institution. So at that time in 2016, Caltech had just made it to the double digits. I think they might have been 11% female in their faculty, and MIT was, I think, on the order of 15% at that point. Okay. So gender is important. And in the US, I mean, yes, as a female mathematician or computer scientist or physicist or engineer or whatever, women are not well represented. But if you look at racial issues, particularly for Black and Hispanic people, race, I mean, I think growing up in Canada, while I don't want to claim that Canada is perfect with respect to race, because certainly we have a lot of work to do with our Indigenous people, race is just not anything resembling what it's like in the US. So here, these are the statistics from, basically over a 7-year period. The percentage of white students, so it already by 2012, from 2006, it had gone from, white students had gone from 70% to about just under 55%. But in another 7 years, it was down to just over 30%. African Americans, so these are the legal, these are legal definitions that the federal government in the US uses. And what's very strange in the US, there are tons of things that are very strange in the US, but one of the things that's very strange is that Hispanic, if you were any percent Hispanic, you count as Hispanic. If you were, say, half Black and Hispanic, you count as Hispanic, but not as Black, and you get recorded as 2 or more races. I mean, it's just weird. But you can see that we've gone from being less than 1% Black to about 4%, and that we've gone from 7% Hispanic to almost 20%. And we've gone from multiracial, 2 or more races, from about 2.5% to over 10%. And we've stayed roughly flat at international. So this was definitely something we were working on very hard. And we finally had a breakthrough in terms of attracting more Black students. So one of the things that in order to change the student representation, so there's a sort of changing to becoming a more diverse institution, there's at least 2 parts to that. One part is actually attracting students to apply and admitting them, attracting faculty to apply and choosing them. The second part is actually changing the experience so it's one in which more diverse faculty and students thrive. And increasing the percentage of women in our student and faculty population was relatively easy. That didn't mean that it was relatively easy for them to come to Mudd and go through the experience there. Because one of the things you find is when all of a sudden you have a more diverse population, there's all kinds of things in your culture that are privileging the traditional dominant group, just white males for us, and doing the opposite to the new members of your culture. But still, bringing women in was relatively easy and happened relatively quickly. And despite all kinds of efforts, we made very little progress with students of color for the first 6 years. And so at some point, I finally realized that I should ask. So this is probably 2012, leaders in STEM who were Hispanic or Black, what it would take to attract more students. And the answer for the Hispanic population was their families want them to go to college close to home. You're in Southern California. So 70% of we're in Los Angeles County. 70% of the people who live in Los Angeles County are Hispanic. So that's close to home. Similarly for San Bernardino County, which is right across the street from us, and for Riverside County, and for Orange County. And so the thing was that public high schools in Southern California are terrible. I mean, they just are really terrible. And almost all of those Hispanic students are going to be going to those public high schools. So in order to change, so we're now about 25% Hispanic in our student population. In order to change that, we decided that we were going to admit students who were among the top handful of students in their high school and who had taken every challenging physics, chemistry, math course that was available in their high school. Now, that still meant that they're going to be much less well prepared than the students who are coming from either the top private schools or from, say, places like Massachusetts or New York City that have excellent public school systems. So we put in a lot more support for our students. And of course, we didn't do it just for our Hispanic students, because that would stigmatize them and make it look as though we thought they needed more support than the regular students. We just put it in for everyone. And I don't want to say that it worked immediately, because the first couple of years that we saw a big increase in our Hispanic students, they didn't do as well. But by now, they're doing just as well as everybody else. For Black students, so we still were not having much success in attracting Black students. And what the Black leaders in the STEM community told me was, well, Black families want their children to go to the best known place they get into. And as I said already, we're competing with places like Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, and MIT, all of which are much better known, particularly in the Black community in the US. And what this page says is that all of a sudden, in 1922, this should probably have to say 2020 to 2021. So when we got the applications for the students who are first-year students this year, we saw an almost 80% increase in the number of applications from Black students. Now, our applications overall increased by 39%, so double from the Black student community. And in our first-year class, just finished, the students who present as Black were almost 18%. So a huge increase. And I think there are two things going on. One was that during the pandemic, the graduates from Harvey Mudd, every single student who wanted to go to grad school got in and went. Every single student who wanted to work got a job. And I think one of the things that just happened was that the tech sector was the only industry sector that did reasonably well during the pandemic. And so the MIT, Caltech, and Mudd also saw huge increases in the number of applications. But the other thing that happened was I was trying to diversify my board, because I feel, so the board of Mudd is humongous. So we're a tiny place, 900 students. We have over 40 people on our board. Why would we have so many people on our board? Okay, it's a fundraising gimmick. You serve on the board of a place like Mudd, and you give an unrestricted gift each year equal to full tuition. Okay, full tuition at Mudd this year is $62,400 American. So now I will say that 70% of our students are on financial aid. And so probably 15% pay nothing. Like we're paying not only for their tuition, we're paying for their room and board. There's another 55% that are getting some level of financial support. And then there's 30% of the students who are basically full pay. And so I wanted our board to be more racially diverse. And so in 2019, I asked members of our board to suggest Black leaders in STEM fields whom I might be able to recruit to the board. And I got roughly 20 names. The number of trustees out of those 20 meetings I had that I got was 0. However, I had an hour-long conversation with each one of them, and I was talking to them about the success of our. So what I didn't succeed in adding any Black people to my board, I did succeed in raising the awareness now of Harvey Mudd. And one of the things, Harvey Mudd graduates are incredibly successful. So in spite of our being so tiny, we are always in the top 3 for early career earnings and for mid-career earnings. And I was able to tell this to the people I talked to, and apparently it made a big difference. So what about the increase in faculty racial diversity? Well, it will not surprise you that that has been much slower. And one of the things I joke is that students stay for 4 to 5 years, faculty stay for 35 years. And so the rate of turnover is much slower. But it's been something that is a priority for us, and we have made fairly steady progress. But one of the things we noticed that as soon as we stop paying attention for any reason, the progress disappears. And probably the most important thing has been to educate our search committees. And what do I mean by educating our search committees? Well, essentially, what we have to do, we all have bias. In every interaction we have with the world, we have bias based on our prior experience. And so part of this is looking for things in our process that will produce bias, that will reduce the number of diverse people. But also the education is, let's suppose you are a very talented person of color who's looking for a faculty position in a STEM field. You will have lots of opportunities. And so it really matters that the experience that we give them through the interview process is a positive one. And it also matters that when we do the negotiation with respect to the salary and the startup package, that's also a positive interaction. So how did all this change happen? I honestly don't know of any institution, large or small, that has been through the kind of change with respect to gender and race that we've been through in the last 16 years. So the really funny thing is I was not expecting to leave Princeton at the time that Harvey Mudd approached me about the presidency. I expected to stay. I had been at Princeton for 2.5 years. As Senior of Engineering, I was expecting to stay for at least 5 years. And we had just gone through a major strategic planning process. We were about to go into campaign mode. Everything was going well. But Princeton is in New Jersey. And my husband and I have lived on the West Coast our entire married life, except for 3.5 years in New Jersey. And we didn't like New Jersey very much. And to be honest, Princeton has a certain arrogance about how excellent it is as a university. And that also did not really appeal to me. And also Princeton was very reluctant to change. And even though I was brought in as the first female dean of engineering with the expectation that we were going to build a great engineering school, the general reaction to any change I suggested to anything was, we're the best university in the world. We don't need to change that. So when I was approached by Harvey Mudd, and I read so when you're approached for a presidential position, they send you, a description of what they're looking for, the characteristics they want in the next president, and, what is special about their special institution. And, in this case, it was probably a 15-page brochure with photographs, et cetera, et cetera. And I printed it out and I gave it to Nick and I said, read this because it sounds like they're looking for me. So he read it and he said, yes, but we just got here and we're not going to move again right now. And I went, well, we really want to move back to the West Coast. And I know I'm going to be president in my next job. So how many places are there on the West Coast that we would be interested in? So we counted and there was about 7. And I said, and when you're doing a search for a president, it's really unpredictable who they're going to pick. And he said, fine, send them your resume, but tell them that you're not a serious candidate. Okay, if you ever want a job, that is the way to do it, because it becomes this contest for them to convince you that you should want it. So I went through the whole process completely sure I wasn't going to take the job. And so what were they looking for? Number one, they wanted the prestige of the Dean of Engineering from Princeton. Number two, the board wanted the president to lead a strategic planning exercise. And I had just finished this major strategic planning exercise at Princeton that was a huge success. And so, I went through the whole thing. I tried to withdraw from the search many, many times. And they kept on saying, no, we know you're not seriously interested, but we just want you in the search for us to compare other candidates with you. Okay, you ever get told that? It's a thing. Well, eventually I get the offer. It's something like December 7th. And, I'm absolutely sure I'm going to turn it down. We are headed to our favorite place in the university, in the universe, which is Pender Island in British Columbia, where we've had a place since 1989. And we are flying from Newark to Seattle, and we have both of our kids with us. So my son, who's the older one, is computer science math geek, like his parents. And then I've told you about our daughter, Sasha, who does peace negotiations. So in any case, they are going to Vancouver to see their friends, and we are headed to Victoria and on the ferry to Pender. And we're sitting in the Seattle airport, and my daughter says to me, Mom, I know what you're going to choose. And I said, okay, so tell me. And she said, no way, I'm not going to take responsibility for you making this decision. And I said, okay, tell Dad, Nick, what you think I'm going to do, and he won't tell me until after I've made my decision. She says, fine. So I head off to the ladies' room. I come back. We continue on to Victoria. We take the ferry to Pender. It is raining, drizzling, and it rains. This is normal at that time of year. It's December. By now it's December 26th. It's drizzling nonstop for the 2 days we're there. I'm absolutely sure I'm staying at Princeton. Okay. I'm going to have the phone call with co-chairs of the search committee at 3 p.m. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table looking out at the water, and I'm painting, I paint watercolors and I do it a lot. And 10 minutes before the phone call is going to happen, all of a sudden, the clouds part, a shaft of light hits the water. I go, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss the most magical opportunity in my life. And Nick is sitting on the couch. We're in this tiny cabin cottage at this point. And so I walk over from the kitchen table where I'm painting to the couch, which is like 3 steps away. And I said, Nick, is it okay if I decide to go to Mudd without having any rational reason to do so? And he said, sure, because he'd already become convinced. He came on one of the things, and he didn't like Princeton, I mean, because of the arrogance. And so, I'm on the call with the co-chairs of the search committee, and I tell them I'm going to accept the position. And then I tell them about the shaft of light, and I can just hear them thinking, she's a complete flake. Now, I mean, have I ever made a decision like that in my life? Absolutely not. So while I'm on the call with the co-chairs of the search committee, I say, wait a minute, I want to ask my husband what my daughter thought I was going to do. So I walk over to the couch, and he says, she knew that you would find some reason somehow to go to Mudd. So part of the result, part of this whole story is I went to Mudd without paying any attention to whether they were interested in diversity and inclusion and equity. I never asked. I just assumed that they must be, because that's what I care about with my life. And so I was somewhat shocked when I arrived and we started our strategic planning process. And of course, I have questions about increasing the diversity of the college as part of the strategic planning process. And the answer I get pretty unanimously from people is, oh, we're a merit-based institution. The only reason there aren't more women and people of color is because they're not really interested in this rigorous STEM education. And I was very lucky that at the 3rd workshop in our strategic planning series, I had Freeman Hrabowski, who is, this is final year as president at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. He's the first Black scientist to hold the presidency of a research one. I was able to convince him to come do a keynote for the 3rd strategic planning workshop. The first 2 I heard over and over again, yeah, diversity is not a thing at Mudd. Not going to do it. Freeman gave this talk about being 12 years old and going to a march with Martin Luther King, and people were in tears. All of a sudden, diversity was a thing at Mudd. So when we finished our strategic planning, we had 6 themes. The 3rd one was unsurpassed excellence and diversity at all levels. Unsurpassed excellence was there because we're not going to lower standards. Most of the faculty and staff were on board after strategic planning. I would say students, board, alumni, not so much. We gradually gained support. But probably the thing that actually took diversity, inclusion, and equity from being something that where it was perceived that the president was doing this to the college, rather than that the college was embracing it, wanting it to happen, was in 2017, March 2017, one of our students who was absolutely beloved, he was a physics major, Hispanic, first generation student, low income family, he was found dead in his dorm room. Now, in student deaths on a university or college campus are always just awful. In a tiny community like Mudd, it was just unbearably painful. And the equipment in Los Angeles County that would have analyzed his blood to tell us what he died from, it was actually an opioid overdose, was down for 4 months. And maybe 2 weeks after Willie was found dead in his dorm room, a Black female student at Scripps College, which is the women's college in Claremont, it's right across the street from mine, was found dead in her dorm room. And it was clearly a suicide. She had a plastic bag over her face. It was a suicide note. She had had a battle with the vice president for student affairs there over something and had killed herself. And almost immediately, the meme across the Claremont colleges was, if you're a student of color in Claremont, you have to kill yourself to get the attention of the administration. And so, well, I won't show it here. We had student protests. It was just, I mean, it was just very, very traumatic. And during that period of time, there were, I mean, we actually canceled classes for 2 days, something never do. I mean, it was just, there was so much emotion and grief and anger. And I won, right in the middle of that, the news came out that I was given a Carnegie Foundation Academic Leadership Award, which is $500,000 to your institution. And they give out, every few years, they give out a couple. The previous round, Freeman Hrabowski had gotten one. So I'm pretty sure that's how I got one. But in any case, we had this grant for $500,000, and we spent all of it on diversity and inclusion programming for our faculty, staff, students, board, I mean, just alumni association, everything. And as a result of that, by a year later, diversity, inclusion, and equity, the faculty basically said, we own this. This is not the president. This is ours. This is what we care about. And so, I mean, Willie's death was just awful. But it was the catalyst that I think really caused our community to come to terms with what it meant to build an inclusive place. And I will say, Willie was a student leader. He was a proctor in a dorm, which is one of our highest student leadership positions. So, all right. So what did we change in order to make this transition? So first of all, every single picture that shows up on our website or in our magazine or just for anything, we try to show women and people of color, white people, I mean, but just we try to make sure that reflects who we want to be. We significantly changed curriculum and pedagogy. So let me pretend to be teaching, I'll say, a first computer science course. It's a very highly rigorous, very challenging. I can start my course. This is the intro course. I can start by saying, this course is extremely challenging. This is where you find out whether you really belong in computer science or not. Or I can start it out and I can say, this course is extremely challenging. Everybody who works hard and asks for help and takes the help is going to do just fine. And so it's just it's not that you're going to in any way dumb down what you're doing. It's what you're basically saying is, yes, it's challenging. Yes, you're going to encounter the challenge. And yes, you're going to do fine taking on the challenge. But it's normal to feel challenged and to feel like you need help. And it's normal to take help. It's also normal to help each other. We found out by adding more women and people of color that we had a number of places where completely unintentionally there was some privilege and bias. So I'll give you an example. The third course in the engineering curriculum is a rocketry course. And so, you build a rocket and then, the major project is you test it and it goes up and it measures things in the atmosphere and it comes down, et cetera. Well, the project, the main project for that course was the same year after year. And it's a team-based course, and the assignment to teams was not random. So a bunch of students have figured this out. And so every summer, there'll be a group of white male students who were top students in engineering, who would get together and start working on that project. So the course happens in the spring semester. So they would work on it during the summer and fall. And so by the time they got into the rocketry course in the spring semester, they were so far ahead of the other students. Well, that's easy to fix. You don't have to change the project. You just make the assignment to teams random. But we only found out about it when we had women in the course who pointed it out that this was happening and that this was unfair because women were never invited to be on this select team, et cetera, et cetera. So we found quite a few things like that here and there, easy to fix, but you won't know about them unless two things are happening. You have more diverse participants and you have leaders who are actively listening for feedback like this. We found that it was very important to provide access to early internships and research opportunities because the research shows that women and people of color are more likely to be retained if they can actually see how the theoretical concepts they're learning are applied. They need to see people like them who are successful in the disciplines. So we started taking our female students the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing. And now that we're 50% female, we don't do that particularly anymore. We take our students of color to conferences like SWE, Society for Women Engineers, SACNES, which is the Society for Hispanic and Chicanos in Science and Engineering, the TAPIA conference, which is the conference for people of color and people with disabilities, et cetera. But we also make sure that our seminar speakers invite the speakers. We have lots of women and people of color as speakers because it's incredibly important for students to see role models that they can relate to. As I already mentioned, we educate our faculty search committees, and we also, try to make sure that the things that are happening outside the classroom are just as supportive as the things that are happening in the classroom. Now, it's hard to change the composition of your board if your board is, as most institutions are, pretty much all alumni. Because given the giving requirement, there are people who have to have been successful financially. So that means that they're probably going to be, in their 50s or 60s or maybe 90s. And so one of the things we deliberately did was change the composition of the board. So it's 20% parents. That's given that gives us access to a lot more diversity, given that our student body is much more diverse. It's 50% alumni because we really do want alumni on the board, but we have 4 or 5 young alumni representing alumni, which means that we're able to diversify. And they don't have their young alumni representatives or recent graduates, we call them, not to have an ageist term. Their giving expectation is significantly less than for regular trustees. And then 30% of the board is other, which means it's people who have no prior relationship with the institution whatsoever. But we have become the role model for diversifying STEM in the US. And so that is people who really care about diversifying, particularly the tech workforce. So what did computer science do? It increased the number of female faculty. They've seen huge changes in racial diversity in 7 years. And they've also increased the number of faculty of color. So probably the most important thing they did was change the introductory course. So every student takes a course in computer science in their first semester. So that experience could be one that is fantastic. It's fun. It's, oh my goodness, it's so engaging, etc. Or it could be one in which you're in a classroom and let's say you have never written a line of code and this is your first exposure to computer science. And there are a few, maybe even several students in the class who've been programming since they were 12 years old or 6 years old, and who've even taken some college courses. And not surprisingly, those people are going to dominate the conversation. They're going to ask most of the questions and answer most of the questions. And of course, if you're there never having written a line of code and feeling very intimidated, it's going to feel to you like, oh my goodness, there is just no way I'm going to do okay in this course. So what they did to the first year course, the old course was learning to program in Java. It wasn't actually learning to program in Java. It was how that was seen by everybody, by the students. Of course, what it really was an introduction to the fundamental concepts in computer science, but it was perceived as learning to program in Java. The new course is presented as, framed as, team-based creative problem solving in science and engineering using computational approaches in Python. Okay, so team-based, so it's not solo. Creative, really important word. There's, as far as I can tell, there's nobody who doesn't want to be seen as being creative. Problem solving, well, we're a STEM college. Everyone likes problem solving in science and engineering. Okay, we have to have computation in there someplace. So there it is, using computational approaches. And it uses Python. And Python is a significantly more forgiving language than Java. But we still have to get away from this experience of having some people in the class who know way more than others. So we group sections by prior experience. So our colors are black and gold. CS5 gold is the section for people with no prior experience. Okay, very important that gold went with that section. Okay, gold is the best, obviously. CS5 black is for people who had maybe one course, maybe an AP computer science course. CS42 combines the material from CS5 and CS60, which is the next course in the sequence. And if you had to choose a number between 5 and 60, you understand 42 would be the one you pick. And elimination of macho behavior. So the outcomes, CS5 Gold is probably the most popular course in the Claremont Course Colleges Consortium. So we teach, so we have probably about 75 of our first year students are in that course. We teach more than 500 students a year, CS5 Gold. So the other 425 students are from the other Claremont colleges. And what's interesting is that from the other Claremont colleges, half of the students taking that course are women, and it's racially very diverse as well. One thing I have to say is, you might wonder, one of the things we're trying to do when students are in black and gold is we're trying to give them a great experience no matter what. But we're also trying to make sure that we eliminate the privilege of being in black before they get into CS60. And so what we do is, typically the students in CS5 Black know about half of the material. So we spend the other half of the time teaching them really interesting, engaging, and important elements in computer science, but we avoid anything that would be in the next two courses in the sequence. So, we teach them cryptography or computer vision or whatever, but we just make sure that they're still going to be, when they go into the next course in the sequence and the course after that, they're not privileged. So this is a photograph from the demonstrations after Willie's death. And I guess the reason I have this slide in there is change is hard. It just is. I mean, for all kinds of reasons. And I think the thing the thing I learned from this experience, which I will just say was definitely my worst experience as president at Harvey Mudd. Challenging things happen, and it's not that I feel like the rise in anger and emotion that came out of this, that was actually one of the things that helped our community process Willie's, the loss of Willie, was actually going through the diversity, inclusion, and equity programming. Okay, so I wanted to put some stuff in. I suspect that pretty much everyone here is from the university, but it's pretty important that if we're going to graduate diverse students in science, engineering, and mathematics, that we try to help the experience that they get after they graduate be positive as well. And at the moment, we're doing a survey of recent graduates, meaning the last 10 years, and to find out, because in the last 10 years, Mudd has been very diverse, and we want to find out what their experience was once they went into graduate programs or into the tech industry, which are where most of our students go. So one of the things that we have said for industry, if you want to recruit a more diverse workforce, it's important to, there's this thing, often there's a job ad and it lists proficiency with, and then there's like 8 different things. And I mean, I'm embarrassed by this, but it just so happens that women will read that list and they think if they don't have all of those proficiencies, they shouldn't apply. And men will read that list and they think, oh, I'm pretty good at 2 of them. That's fine. It's ridiculous that, and of course there are women who read the list and think I'm good at 2 of them and apply. That would probably be me, since, you know, to a very large extent, I have spent most of my life feeling more comfortable with the male ways of interacting with the universe than the female ways. But so, you know, so this is you know, when I say men will do this and women will do this, that's on average. It doesn't mean everyone will do it that way. But what we know is that if your job ads stress creativity, collaboration, communication, people skills, as well as technical skills. Now, the truth of the matter is, whether it's Google or Microsoft or a startup, they actually want all of those skills, but job ads rarely list them, and the interview process rarely makes it clear to the applicant that they care about them. So actually, you know, listing them and then making your list of technical skills clear that it's desirable rather than required. The interview process, there's this history of adversarial technical interviews in the tech industry, which basically means, you know, I'm meeting somebody, they barely say good morning or good afternoon, and they ask me to go up to a whiteboard and pseudocode the solution to some data structures problem. And as soon as I'm up there and scribbling, they're basically sort of, well, why are you doing that? Why did you do this? Etc. Now, some people feel completely comfortable. Not everyone does, including not the people who are the best candidates for your job. So trying to make sure that some of the people that interview your diverse candidates are diverse as well, but also training them on diversity and inclusion. And then once you have diverse people in your workforce, making sure that you build confidence and community among them. I mean, if you're the only woman in coder in a group of 8, it's really not unusual to feel left out, because there are just various things going on that you don't feel you're included in. And then probably the most important one is making it clear what it takes to be promoted, because it often seems very mysterious. And so if I think I'm doing a really good job in my particular position, and yet I see several guys get offered promotion opportunities, it's probably going to be hard for me to meet with my manager and say, why am I not being promoted? And so, and now we have lots of time for questions or discussion.